1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, welcome back to Country and Cold Cans. I'm Logan, sitting here with Trucker Andy and Kyle, and be sure to give us 5 stars and a great review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and click the subscribe button while you're at it. Share it with your friends. If you have any questions, any comments, or anything you want to say, or music you want us to check out, there is a link in the description of this podcast that says click here to leave us a voicemail. We would love to hear from you, and we will play it on the show the following week. Check out the website, countryandcoldcans.com, for blog content and merch.
Beginning of September, football is starting tonight. And it was 107 real the other day. I'm sorry, it's too hot.
It's the hottest in North Carolina, at least. It's been the hottest week of the summer so far.
I'm sorry, I just have to rant and rave. I'm just sick of it. I'm tired. It is the 1st of September. It is football season. It's fully underway as of tonight.
It's still summer technically, but
yes, I know it's still summer technically. But God bless, man. I'm sick of it.
I'm sick of it being this hot too, to be honest, because the time for me to go to the beach and the lake is over. So
yes, I agree. Yes, it is. I have July and August for the heat. September, we're starting to get, you're starting to get the cool down, which we might get this weekend.
Right.
As long as this massive storm stays its ass out in the Atlantic. Hurricane Lee or whatever it's supposed to be.
Yeah, well, hopefully it does, because every time.
I'm sorry, I just had a rant about the heat. I'm so God, dude.
Every time NC State has a big time non-conference game, there's almost always a hurricane coming. So hopefully it stays away this time. All right, so let's talk about the top of the show. We have to mention the unfortunate passing of Jimmy Buffett. Jimmy Buffett passed away September 1st, earlier this week on Labor Day. He had a rare skin cancer that he had been diagnosed 4 years ago, and I think it seeped into his bloodstream somehow, and he ended up developing lymphoma. Mm-hmm. They had kind of kept it a private matter over the years, because I wasn't even aware he was sick, right? But Jimmy Buffett is a guy who is just a legendary guy in music. His devoted fans, the Parrot Heads, he kind of has that escapist island kind of mentality, and is one of the few artists that when you listen to his music, you immediately kind of takes you into that headspace of being toes in the water or toes in the sand, kind of sitting there by the ocean. He was putting out music for a long, long time, since the early 1970s. And what a lot of people don't know about Jimmy Buffett is, other than just the big standards that everybody knows, like Margaritaville, Cheeseburger in Paradise, Changes in Latitudes, Changes in Attitudes, is other than the novelty songs like that, Jimmy Buffett is actually a songwriter. If you go back, especially the first 3 or 4 records he put out, it's some heavy pedal steel. He was a country musician to start. It wasn't always super more pop oriented or soft rock oriented, all about the islands. But he was very well respected by his peers that are some of the top songwriters in the genre, such as John Prine. John Prine was a fan of Jimmy Buffett's. They were friends. Hardly nobody did kind of this wistfulness, this kind of melancholy feeling of longing to just always be on the go and you're running from something, and did it in a way that Jimmy Buffett did. That 70s output, that run he had in the 70s is a fantastic run of albums that I definitely recommend checking out, because everybody knows Margaritaville, everybody knows Cheeseburger in Paradise, but there is some fantastic songwriting in the early part of his career, and even some in the later part of his career as album cuts. But rest in peace to a legend. I unfortunately never got to see him. I almost went to go see him when I was in college, but at the last minute I ended up not going. I kind of regret that. But Jimmy Buffett, man, he was the first billionaire and only billionaire in country music history.
I didn't know that. So
Yeah.
I always thought his name was Jimmy Buffet. Never mind.
Jimmy Buffet.
Yeah, Jimmy Buffet. I only know the hits, to be perfectly honest. beach music, not really my scene. But yeah, he was huge. He beach music and yacht rock, in my opinion, are the only two genres that probably you can get anyone to agree to listen to.
Yeah.
I mean, some people hate pop, some people hate country, some people hate classic rock, but yacht rock and beach music, most people can agree to listen to it. And he was the par excellence, if you will. He was the name in the beach music scene for a long time, as I always know him. Um, I swear I thought he was older than what 76.
76 years old. Yeah.
Swear I thought he was older than that. Because he's just been around my entire life, and he's
He was
looked the
younger than both the president and the leading candidate for the Republican nomination for president. Think about that.
that's another topic all its own. Yeah, I mean, it's just what, yeah, like I said, it. I swear I thought he was older than that. He's looked the same for the past 30 years.
Yeah.
So I just assumed, I was like, oh, he's got to be well into his 80s. Nope, he's 76. I think we're going to see more and more of this, which I respect. Celebrities keeping health issues private, and it
Yeah.
just shows up. Chadwick Boseman comes to mind,
Mm-hmm.
who was sick for years with a rare cancer, and he just dies suddenly. Horrible. But I do respect the family keeping that locked up tight. They're still a person just like you and me. It's not our business.
Yeah, we don't need to know every aspect of their life.
Yeah. I think we're going to see more and more of that in our way too online world. That some things are just going to be, kept under a little bit of lock and key. It's sad to see. He lived a hell of a life.
Yeah, he did. I mean, basically spent a
he
lot of
lived-
his time between touring and Key West.
Yeah, I mean, he lived a hell of a life most people can only dream of. So, am I sad? I mean, I wasn't deeply connected to his music, but a lot of people were. So,
Yeah. Especially like
yeah.
the generations older than us, like I said, the people that make up the majority of the parrot heads, they were huge fans, and just the impact Jimmy Buffett had. If you think
Yeah.
about that era in the mid 2000s to early 2010s, where if you look on a track list of any of those records, there's always at least one kind of beachy country song. And that was a lot of that was because of Jimmy Buffett. People may say, well, what about Kenny Chesney, coming out with that stuff in the early 2000s? If there wasn't a Jimmy Buffett, that era of Kenny Chesney's career, and Kenny Chesney has been like the only consistent stadium draw for this long period of a time in country music. And a lot of that is because Kenny Chesney kind of went the Jimmy Buffett route. And a lot of the parrot heads have kind of adopted Kenny Chesney. So without Jimmy Buffett, Kenny Chesney's like kind of niche that he carved out for himself within mainstream country. The very thing the mainstream country back when Jimmy Buffett started out didn't like about him. It wouldn't have been a thing. So without Jimmy Buffett, Kenny wouldn't have had the success he did.
Yeah, I mean, even to a much lesser extent, Zach Brown band tried to tap into it for a short period there. They had the Toes in the Water song.
They did Knee Deep, which was a collab with Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah, Knee Deep. Yeah, they tried to tap into it. But, like I said, that's just a space that he owned.
Mm-hmm. You think about like his one of his streamed songs on Spotify is "It's 5 O'clock Somewhere" with Alan Jackson.
Yes, fantastic.
That was
song.
CMA Musical Event of the Year, and that was the only award Jimmy Buffett ever won in his entire career.
Huh.
Like it's incredible. But that was a big time song that he brought Buffett on. Then there was that tour that it would have been awesome to go see back in the mid 2000s. It was George Strait, Alan Jackson, Jimmy Buffett. They did like a live album, I believe, from that tour. So rest in peace to a legend, Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah,
all right,
absolutely.
Let's move into the main topic today that I found interesting. I think you guys did too. I sent y'all that video the other night that Grady Smith had put out, and it was it was tackling this kind of issue with mainstream kind of like the direction mainstream country and just country music in general has gone. And it was titled "This is Country Music's Nirvana Moment." And like the thumbnail is funny because it has Kurt Cobain off to the right, Zach Bryan up front, and then there's Florida Georgia Line and Luke Bryan from their "This Is How We Roll" music video off to the left. And kind of the overarching argument that he makes is that you take a look at rock music in the 80s, right? You had hair metal. Hair metal was incredibly popular. It was very glossy, very slick, and was a lot about like having fun, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You know what I mean? It wasn't very deep music. And then along came this band from Seattle, Nirvana, with this kind of like angsty their music. It's a lot different in how it sounds. Like their style is a lot more messy in like how they present themselves, and it just took the young people by storm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And hair metal just kind of essentially fizzled out. And then he compared that to 10 years ago when we were right in the middle of bro country era. The bro country era was kind of country music's hair metal. It was kind of fun music that was talking about sex, drinking on the tailgate, and bonfires.
Painted on blue jeans.
And painted on blue jeans. And that was kind of like the music of the time within the mainstream. Mm-hmm. But then fast forward a few years, and in comes this guy from Oklahoma by the name of Zachary Lane Bryan, who organically just became like a mega star by putting up YouTube videos while he was in the Navy. And now he's selling out like arenas, amphitheaters, and stadiums. And his music is a lot more stripped back. It's a lot more raw. It's a lot more, it isn't so glossy and slick. Not these big time, really expensive music videos. It's him with a stripped down acoustic performance in the woods somewhere. And I found the analogy there pretty interesting. And I kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts on it because I like overall pretty much agree with it, like with the case he laid out. But I was curious what you guys thought after looking at the video. Is this country music's Nirvana moment?
Andy, go ahead. I'll defer to you first.
I would agree with him on that. It's the minor details of the video where I'd have slight disagreements, maybe. They're not big because I, for the most part, agree with him.
Andy, how did he not know who Rat was? Is all I want to know. Did he not listen to Barney Stinson's "Get Psyched" mix?
That's what I thought. I'd never heard anybody. He said Rat, and I was like, I know a Rat song. It's popular. But like the two people he mentioned was like he mentioned three, I think, but I can't remember one. But like Sturgill Simpson and Tyler Childers. Let me back up a little. I don't know that it's necessarily like the stripped back Zach Bryan sound, because I think there's three people before Zach Bryan that were on somewhat of the path to stardom.
Isbell, Childers, and Sturgill.
Isbell's the one. I don't think he was going to this stardom, but the three I think would be Turnpike, Childers, and Sturgill, and I think they all, in all different ways, blew it. Sturgill kind of changed his sound a little bit,
got into drugs,
kind of weird. Yeah, he did some drug stuff, and I think that just
drug sound and
killed
music.
Drug
sound and music.
Kind of killed the stardom that he was headed for. And like with Tyler Childers, after Purgatory came out, he just wasn't like social media active. He just didn't do all of the right things to get to this stardom. And like with Turnpike, I think they were really on the way they were really blowing up. Like when they were opening for Miranda Lambert and everything.
Yeah.
They were selling out stuff immediately. And then they fell off the rails personally.
he started stooping Miranda Lambert.
And the thing, allegedly, we don't know. But the thing is, country music or country and cold cans gossip. But Andy, the thing is with Turnpike too, like they themselves are kind of like people that just let the music speak for itself. They're not quite as social media savvy, and they were just on Bobby Bones' show a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, wait, what? So I clicked on it, listened to the interview, and doing interviews doesn't come natural for Evan Felker. he seemed very, very uncomfortable throughout the entire interview. Whereas Zach Bryan, on the other hand, has like if you listen to his interview with Rogan, it comes a little bit easier to him.
But yeah, I would say Zach Bryan is a classic person of he just doesn't give a damn. He says what comes to his mind and he lets it fly.
Agree, but it's like I agree with your point there. I'm not disagreeing with it. I'm adding on to that. But you still have to have that ability to be able to talk on an interview effortlessly.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that comes natural to Evan Felker, whereas it comes a little easier to Zach Bryan.
Yeah. To your point, I agree with Turnpike. You know, Evan and Turnpike had their own problems. Thus, they broke up. Sturgill, he got really into drugs, apparently. Changes his sound. Some people are not big fans of it. Tyler, let's call it like it is. He gets really into certain agendas. And
I don't know if I actually agree with that, but
I mean,
I really don't.
Whatever
agree with that.
I think he did the instrumental.
Yeah, but I don't really think. I don't think that hasn't been pervasive. Like political stuff is what you're referring to.
Yes,
I don't think that's been pervasive through the majority of his music. It's been 2 songs like that. I think his mistake has been. It hasn't been the last 2 albums.
No, excuse me.
It's been 2 songs.
The instrumental album.
Yeah, it's been 2 songs. But I think the thing with Tyler Childers has been his sound changed from the Purgatory record. That was the subject matter changed a little bit, and the sound changed. I don't think he didn't become overly political, a la John Rich from the right or Jason Isbell from the left.
Yes,
so I don't think that's necessarily fair to say that's what impeded him from reaching the Zach Bryan.
That's fair. That's fair. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he went from talking about the struggles of Appalachia to whatever the fuck you want to call it, to other random things. You know, dogs go to heaven and other things, and he did a quasi gospel album about the Universalists,
which is fine. But the thing that Zach Bryan did, the reason he hit that next level is because Zach Bryan doubled down on what he was doing before on what he was popular for.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yes, there is a point where you get very popular, and you know, I have a saying. It's not me that invented it, but dance with the one that brought you.
Hey, the Turnpike said that.
Yeah. You know, it's a very old saying, but you know, Zach doubled down on it. Yeah. Tyler Childers, I don't think did that.
No, and honestly, I don't think that Sturgill and Tyler Childers wanted to reach that level of superstardom that Zach Bryan has, though. I don't.
That's fair.
Think that Sturgill. I think Sturgill in particular purposefully went when we thought he was going to go left, he went right. On
that's fair,
just because the follow up to Meta Modern Sounds, I liked it.
Taylor's Got Grass,
but then the one after that,
the Cutting Grass.
No, it was the rock record with the red cover. I didn't really listen to much of it because I just could not get into the sound of it. Those 2 records were such a departure from what the initial appeal to Sturgill was, and then he follows that up with Cutting Grass, the bluegrass albums, volumes 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So I just think that to Andy brought up a very good point there. I think that some of these guys didn't want to reach that next level, and so they did things that, whether consciously or subconsciously, impeded that from happening.
That might I would agree with that. Some old self-sabotage.
Yeah, good old self-sabotage.
Yeah, I mean,
like Tyler Childers had a 2-year gap after Purgatory before he put anything else out new, which Zach Bryan obviously puts out stuff constantly, which I mean, I don't think if you can't put out that much good stuff in a period of time, you probably should. It's not going to work putting out subpar stuff. But to me, like with Tyler Childers in that gap, to me, it just wasn't much going on with him. Like
I would even say it's longer than that.
Music
the thing. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's probably closer to 4 or 5 years because Purgatory is 2017.
Well, no,
17.
but see,
Yeah,
And-
the
and then he
next
did
thing was
the-
19. I looked at that.
No,
No,
but-
Well, he did the instrumental album.
No, but see this is where I was glad you said that. While I was a big fan of it,
Well, he did Country
he
Squire.
didn't
19's
Country
last
Squire.
album.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
19.
Country Squire came out, and it was not that different from Purgatory overall.
That's fair. Yeah, I
Right.
love Country Squire.
But
yeah.
but the thing was, it didn't come top of mind for you. It didn't come top of mind for me. The album was very, very good, but it was not. It didn't have the impact that he didn't
That's fair,
follow
yeah.
up Purgatory with something
fair.
just as impactful. Even though I'm a big, big fan of that record.
Yeah.
But
Didn't
it's
have a
funny
White
how
House
that
Road.
can. Yeah, it didn't have that. And now he purposefully doesn't want. He doesn't play that or Feathered Indians. I've heard in concert anymore. So it's like I said, there are sometimes that people just don't want to. They do things to go against the grain from what could make them even more popular. And it's funny because you think about like people in Nashville just giving in to selling out, like we've talked about on a previous episode, to get popular. These guys didn't have to sell out. They just could have continued making the same damn good music they were making before. Maybe be a little bit creative here and there, but they went completely different directions. And sometimes I think it was purposeful because they didn't want to reach that like next level, as quickly maybe. Because Tyler Childers has sold out. He's played arenas. It's not like he hasn't.
Yeah.
Jason Isbell's played arenas, Andy. Like it's not like he hasn't. Because Isbell probably hit that level of amphitheaters, like the mid-sized amphitheaters, before Childers or Churchill. But Isbell, I don't necessarily 100% count in this because Isbell's always been rock. He isn't. The other ones were much closer to country and or were country. So Isbell was kind of a different scenario in my mind.
Yeah, he also actively tries to alienate.
He's very
his fans.
political. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's very political.
Yeah. he's very active in the scene, if you will.
But let's focus on Zach Bryan for a minute. But like Andy, you've touched on it a little bit, but what do you think is the reason why he has resonated so much? Because it's just funny to me that younger people have been latched on to Zach Bryan and that type of music so much. Because the best example I can give you is like a guy I know who's about 10 years older than us. He doesn't listen to country, doesn't listen to roots music. He heard about Zach Bryan because he went on Joe Rogan. He asked me about him because he knows I'm into that kind of music. And I told him, I said, oh yeah. I said, look, this guy is like ridiculously popular with young people, like people younger than me by a good bit. He goes, what? He goes, let's play a few of the songs. He was expecting it to be like banger after banger, like in your face kind of shit. And it wasn't. It was like acoustic guitar, this guy being kind of like poetic about stuff and just singing about struggles. And he goes, this is popular with young people. I don't get it. He goes, there's nothing in your face about this. There's nothing gangster about this. And I'm just like, maybe the younger generation, hopefully, are more like us, where that isn't necessarily all that they want to listen to. Is just like the very vapid, banger after banger kind of song. They want something a little bit more. So what is it about Zach Bryan that you guys think made him perfectly suited? Whether it's both on a musical front and on like to Andy's point about what he was making the other artists on the social media savvy and everything. What is it about Zach Bryan that kind of made him the catalyst for him to be like the Kurt Cobain like person within this kind of run?
Well, I disagree with Grady's theory in general about the sudden change from hair metal to grunge and then later new metal. He specifically leaves out a huge geopolitical event that happens when that sudden shift happens. The Berlin Wall fell in 1991.
Yeah.
Suddenly you take out all of the angst and problems, extensively all the problems in the world for the United States at that time. They have no geopolitical threat. They're the king of the world. The world is essentially from 1991 to about 2001 was the greatest time as far as geopolitics go.
So what you're saying is the removal of the angst the music was escapist because of the angst and the worry within the world. So the removal
Yes.
of that, then the vacuum
it-
of what the angst had to be filled with something.
Yes, because young people are always looking for something. Teenage angst is always something. They need something to fill a void, if you will. And the late '80s, early '90s, until Nirvana hits, you have something to quintessentially escape, the impending doom of nuclear war that our parents grew up with and our grandparents grew up with, and all of a sudden that just stops suddenly, 1991. So you have to fill that void somewhere, and that's where I think grunge music comes from. And if you watch a really good documentary on HBO, which is about Woodstock '99, I think it does a good job explaining how there's
that's the
nothing.
why. I agree with you, but that's the why of why it happened, not necessarily of what happened. Like what happened is what he said, but you're explaining the why, which is a good point. But
Yeah.
what's the reason though? Let's fast forward to now. What's the reason for the change in country music over the last 10 years? Because even in the mainstream, like John Party wasn't as big 10 years ago, and people like him wasn't as big. Lainey Wilson people like her wouldn't have been as big 10 years ago. Zach Bryan and Tyler Childers selling all the tickets and having the streaming numbers they do. Luke Combs is the biggest guy in the genre, right? And his music is decidedly more country than anything we would have heard back when Brantley Gilbert was singing Bottoms Up dressed like a mobster in that ridiculous music video. So it's like,
yeah, I mean,
so like, what's the reason for the shift in country music? Then
I don't know the why. To be perfectly honest with you, to me, it's just honestly, I really don't know. I'm grateful for it, but I can't explain it because there are problems in the world as there always are. But like, there wasn't a seismic shift, if you will, to cause this as there were in the early '90s. I mean, there's a fine line of demarcation in 1991 where you can easily see this happened, thus this happens. There hasn't been one in the last 10 years, I would say. So maybe it's just change for the good. I really don't know. I can't see the
country's always been pretty cyclical in some ways because like if you think about the '80s overall was kind of slick and a little bit of what was pop country of the day, and then along comes George Strait and Randy Travis. They kind of set the scene for the class of '89. The Garth Brooks, the Alan Jackson, the Clint Black. The next year you had Brooks and Dunn. So it was like it took in a lot of ways that's analogous to now where you had Turnpike, Tyler Childers, Sturgill Simpson kind of setting the scene, and then someone like Zach Bryan comes along. Even though Zach Bryan is not as decidedly country as say Tyler Childers has been, it still kind of set the scene for Zach Bryan to kind of take it to the next step.
I mean, maybe it's just generational.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be really my only take. That was my really only beef with Grady's video is just a clear line of demarcation that he just forgot.
I think he was more or less using it as an analogy to the last 10 years in countries. But I agree, like you have a good point about the why that happened in rock music back then. And then, like he said, you even had like a lot of people that kind of borrowed from grunge and ended up with one of your favorite genres, butt rock, that was kind of a sanitized version of carrying on from what the 90s did. And then it eventually fell out of favor. And rock is kind of like, as a mainstream format, kind of dormant now, unfortunately. But
it died about 2005.
Yeah. Andy, what's your take?
I don't know necessarily like the change in country music is necessary. Kind of like what I said earlier too, is like it's not as day and night somewhat as he made it out to be. Like Luke Combs has been around for over 5 years now.
I would say he's pushing 10.
Purgatory was
it's
like
10 for us because we were aware of North Carolina, but he's talking about like with the public.
Okay.
So we also have to kind of remove ourselves from the three of us being the three of us doing a country podcast because we know a lot about a lot of these guys before they get real popular. Whereas literally 6 years ago, you could have seen Riley Green and Luke Combs play together at a bar for $10.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I just remember Sean.
Yeah,
go ahead, Andy. Go ahead.
It's like some ways, like Hurricane was. I remember that being popular.
It's 15.
That came out in
2015, 2016.
It didn't hit the radio then. It hit the radio probably 2017 or 18.
Okay,
yeah,
maybe, yeah.
So, that's a slower. Purgatory was 17. A lot of this, it's been coming for a while. I think it's a slow shift, and then Zach Bryan is the one that is distinctly different that has become super popular. All right, so I don't think it's a day and night, because Turnpike was huge right before they broke up. They were becoming massive, and that was what 2019, I believe.
2019 was when they went on hiatus, and you can make the argument that they're bigger now than they've ever been in terms of popularity.
Yeah, when I say in 19, because we'll never know what happened because they went on hiatus. But that was 4 years ago. So you have that, and then with Zach Bryan, I guess one is he did all the right things. He can continuously put new stuff out, and he's active on social media. And I've said this before, like with the younger people, Zach Bryan can write a song that relates to people in their 20s that I would say almost nobody has ever been able to do before.
Right.
He can do that like nobody else. And then I've never seen him, but his shows look to be a good crowd show. It, sing along aspect, it's all there. I think that's part of what it is for him. And then I don't see it as necessarily a day and night change for him to be I don't think it's out of nowhere. This guy's entirely different and he's here. I kind of think it's been people have been wanting it for a while. And I said, a lot of people just they didn't do all the right things that Zach Bryan did for him to be as popular as he is. I think other people could have achieved this if they had the abilities that he does. And I guess I'll add there, another thing I heard him say is, like Grady Smith says, like, this sound of Zach Bryan is becoming popular. Like, more people are doing it. This is not going to work. I don't think this sound works if you can't write songs that are fantastic.
Right.
There's not many people that are going to be able to write Zach Bryan songs.
Well, I mean, it's like if you listen to a lot of people doing the most covered song on social media a few years ago, by far, was Feathered Indians. Then you had a lot of people that tried to come out and be a Purgatory, Tyler Childers sound-alike. And there's nothing wrong with sounding similar to something because everybody sounds similar to somebody. But it's a matter of when the industry starts trying to sign guys to sound like that. And to Andy's point, the songwriting isn't there because that inevitably happens.
Yes. The one thing I would agree with Grady on is my parents were younger than we are currently in the early 90s. My mother was 22, 23. They were hair metal fans. And it's just what you grew up on here in high school in the late 80s. But they weren't ever really big Nirvana fans, which I think is kind of that generational gap.
Yeah.
That I think Zach Bryan just certainly finds himself in. They're younger than we are currently, but we're all Zach Bryan fans. But if you just put it, a lot of his fan base, in my opinion, is probably 23, 24, 25 now.
Well, maybe younger. A lot of his fans span to 18 to even up to our age, but like definitely like people in their 30s have a hard time with Zach Bryan.
So we're saying the median is probably like 24.
The median's probably 23, 24, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's, like I said, that's just I think it might just be purely generational. We're on the my parents' tail end of the boomers. We're on the tail end of millennials. And we just might be reliving the same thing they relived 30 years ago. where they grew up on we grew up on the tail end of bro country, and we liked the new stuff, but they grew up on the tail end of hair metal, but they weren't that big on the grunge because by the time they had came up, you get past that teenage angst and everything else, and you're a young adult, and you're starting to start your life. You're starting to get into a good spot.
Yeah. Well, that's a big reason why people that loved punk music when they were young end up country music fans when they're old.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love.
You
punk
remove the
music.
angst. I do too.
I love punk music.
You remove the angst and you get country music.
I mean, yeah, pretty much. I mean, but they, and then I was late to the party. I was late on the new metal, but to me, I think it might just be purely generational because the early Gen Xers have Gen Zs. No, hold on, let me do the math.
Gen X is after baby boomers.
Yeah, so
because the Gen Xers love Nirvana.
Yeah, the late Gen Xers had us. The early millennials now have Gen Zers, and we're all late millennials. We're at the very tail end.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, it might just. I think it might just be. I mean, I've always said the things you listen to when you're like 17, 18, 19 is the stuff you grew up on. You'll never be able to replace it. It's just what you heard when you were young. It's what you grew up on. I'm a huge 90s country fan.
Yeah.
It's just what I grew up on. So you can never tell me it's terrible because it never will be.
Right. Even no matter what Andy says.
Yeah, no matter what Andy says. I think a lot of Zach Bryan and this group is just growing up on it in the internet era where they. And the other thing I think is they also want something different from their parents. There is a certain aspect of when you're a teenager to be rebellious and different from your parents. You want something different, unless you're classic rock harder.
But yeah, and a lot of the kids that are in that age cohort for Zach Bryan, their parents grew up and were like young people in the early 2000s where they were listening to Rick Ross and Nelly and
the new metal.
It's just and like there isn't a whole lot. It's very vapid music. It's like playing in the kiddie pool lyrically.
Yeah, I mean, it's good music though. That's good music though.
I'm not saying it's not fun. Look, it's the same with bro country. Like as much as we let the dog on bro country, if the three of us were to say that in 2013 when we were 19 years old,
Cruise came on, yeah, we're playing.
Cruise came on, or Bottoms Up came on, that we weren't like kind of jamming along with everybody else at the pool. We'd be lying if we said we didn't. Does that make it good? No.
Up.
That's true. Sure. Andy didn't like Bottoms Up.
Don't Andy, but you used to love on me. I've never liked that song.
I will put on you though. Yep, that's where it's at by Dustin Lynch because you loved that song.
That one was okay. I like that. You would have had me if you picked the album before that.
The album before that, if you go back and listen to it, kind of is not very good. There's like two decent songs on it, but we just at the time didn't know any better.
Oh, hey, look. Early Chris Young, fantastic. Late Chris Young.
Oh, don't get me started on how much Andy used to listen to Chris Young.
I was bumping it, but it wasn't very good.
That was coincidence.
I was bumping Late Chris Young. It wasn't very good, but I was still bumping it.
Kyle, I early Chris Young I was a big fan of, but Andy, I swear, when we were in high school, he had study hall the same period I had Spanish 4. I would leave midway through Spanish 4.
Studious.
I would leave midway through Spanish 4 every day and spend about like 10 minutes with him and another buddy of ours in their study hall. Every single time I walked in, Andy was listening to Chris Young.
I mean,
every time.
Pandora.
That 2010.
I have no control over Pandora.
Oh, okay. Oh, God. The Spotify was out then. I had it then, but
I can't remember if I did or not. I think I did in 12th grade.
2011.
Yeah, it was out. Yeah, I
was pretty early on Spotify.
Yeah,
I didn't pay for it, but I had the free version.
I would, like I said, early Chris Young. Yeah, I was bumping that.
Oh, hell yeah.
The 2010 album, I think it was, or 09.
No, that 09 when like Voices came out and the little black dress song.
Yeah, that's right. Oof.
Taking You Home, I think is what it was called.
Yeah, then he had
Cowboy Hat era. Chris Young.
I think it was 09. I think it was 2010. He had the duet where he did with Willie, where he did the Waylon song.
Oh, that was the record before that, actually.
Oh, is it earlier than that?
That was
Okay.
his first album.
Yeah, well,
They did.
that song.
Was it Rose in Paradise? Right.
Rose in Paradise. Yes.
Yeah.
God damn, it was fantastic. But yeah,
That was a good era for Chris Young, but
one of the most disappointing mainstream
We've
artists.
been listening to Neon.
Neon, yeah.
That's the album.
Neon was pretty
Neon.
good though.
I like
Neon was
Neon.
pretty good. Yeah.
It is, yeah. It's pretty. Yeah, I'd still listen to this. Might listen to it
I would.
tomorrow.
Oh, I would too.
Yeah.
I actually might go back and listen to it some more.
Because tomorrow is good.
Yeah, tomorrow's fantastic.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's not a Nirvana moment because, quite frankly, I don't think Nirvana was that good of a band. And this is coming from someone who, they were weird as fuck. It's coming somebody who will defend the grunge and new era to my death, but Nirvana wasn't that good.
Nirvana wasn't the best grunge band. They were just the band, right place, right time. It was the band that kind of kicked the doors open. And I think that's the point, though.
And Kurt Cobain died too, though.
Yeah, that helped out because he was a martyr, basically.
Yeah, he swallowed a shotgun.
But that's the point, though. It's like Zach Bryan kind of is like Nirvana in my mind, because it's not that it just came out of nowhere, because if you were paying attention, it didn't come out of nowhere, as Andy pointed out. But
fair.
A lot of people don't pay attention. And Zach Bryan has kind of kicked the doors open to where people that 3 years ago wouldn't have listened to this kind of music are checking out the new Zach Bryan record. And it's because it's now the trendy thing. And as Andy said, it only took 10 years. But we're finally the cool kids in the country music world. We better enjoy the ride while we can, because it won't last. It never does. But we're the cool kids in the country music world.
I think it will last because
history says otherwise on that, though.
Well, here's my thing. 10 years ago, the nerds, which I was one of, were the lames. They got bullied in the locker room, if not.
Yeah, because you and Carter were talking about your Dragon Ball Z cards and your Pokemon.
Yu-Gi-Oh! That's right. But the nerds won. The nerds won the culture war. It's cool to be a nerd now.
Say so.
Yeah.
It's cool to be a nerd now.
As long as you're a certain level of nerd, as long as you're a mainstream nerd. The moment you get into like Dungeons and Dragons and that Magic stupid game, then you're too far.
If you go to a public meetup, you're not. Yeah, you're not getting laid anytime.
If you're going to a Renaissance fair,
I mean, and like it's still fucking weird to be a cosplayer and shit like that, but But mainstream nerd, like, I like high fantasy, like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars. Yeah, you're cool. It's the mainstream now. And it's probably been that way for 15 years.
The thing that kicked the door open for that, and I know you're gonna hate it, but it was the Marvel movies.
No,
they were so successful.
I would say it's the prequels to Star Wars.
No. Because that wasn't the cool era yet.
They were huge.
No, let me tell you, because it was Star Wars, but it wasn't a mainstream phenomenon. It was still the Star Wars movies were big. People took their kids to see it, but the Star Wars movies were the Tyler Childers, Turnpike Troubadours, and Sturgill Simpsons that laid the groundwork. Were big, but then if it wasn't for those movies, the Marvel movies wouldn't have been as successful.
All right. Well,
the Marvel movies were the Zach Bryan, and those were the Turnpike Childers and Sturgills of the world.
All right, fair.
It's a really good analogy. It's a good point.
If
we should make a video and say
fair,
this is
Star Wars.
Say this is country music's Marvel moment.
All right. The only concern I have is if that's true, country music is in a dangerous spot because Marvel has overshot its load desperately.
Well, that's what's going to happen, though, because this type of music will always be made, and we will always listen to it. But in terms of the mainstream consciousness, there's a shelf life to it. Because right now, you had while Morgan Wallen is definitely more pop country, Luke Combs is more middle of the road country, and then but Morgan Wallen and Luke Combs and Oliver Anthony made up the 3 songs on the top 100 of all genres.
Yes,
that has not happened in forever, if it had ever happened, where a country artist had the top 3 songs. We are in kind of a weird moment as country music fans, where country is getting a lot of attention. Kind of like the 90s. It happened in the 90s.
All right, I'll agree with you. Those 3 are the Marvel moment. However, I would say Wade Bowen and Jason Isbell are the prequels.
Wade Bowen?
Yeah, he's been at it forever. Texas, Red Dirt scene.
Yeah, but that didn't really leave Texas.
Yeah.
Popularity-wise, it never really left Texas.
Yeah, because the thing about, as much as I love Wade Bowen or Randy Rogers Band, huge fan. The reality is they signed to a major label in the mid-2000s and never gained traction. Whereas they laid the groundwork. Yeah, they laid the groundwork for Parker McCollum to be doing as well as he is.
I'm saying laying the groundwork. The Star Wars prequels laid the groundwork for. People hate them, but as bad as what would they technically be called? The original trilogy, the prequels. What are the newest 3? What would they be called? Anyway, the newest 3. The newest 3. People hated the prequels when they came out. But then the newest 3 came out, and they were like, "Oh, the prequels weren't that bad."
Kind of made you appreciate the prequels a little bit.
Yeah, the prequels weren't that bad. They weren't terrible. They're much better than the newest 3. So
right.
Okay, all right. My analogy may not have been as good as yours, but somebody fits that bill. In my opinion, somebody laid the groundwork for nerd shit to be.
Yeah.
Nerd shit, country music.
I think the premise of your point is true, and I agree with you, because like it takes some stuff bubbling underneath the surface of the thing about the 3 of us sometimes get blinded by is we're not the mainstream. Like while we listen to some mainstream stuff, we're not so far down the rabbit hole where we're not aware of what's going on in the mainstream. We are much more have our finger on the pulse of what's going on in the independent world and in Texas and in Appalachian country than like our friends do. Because our friends, go to your random friends who are not big music fans and ask them what artists just listen to what artists they talk about. That kind of gives you a better sense of what is popular, because we're not the popular kids when it comes to music. Until now that we finally are.
And the other, go ahead, Andy. Go ahead.
Like, far as where we're heading, I'm a little curious, because like what Logan says, like when we poll our friends, the age group we're a little old of, but like something else like Grady Smith said is like that, like Wyatt Flores is really big on TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, like, if that's going to take off, which it appears that it is. Wyatt Flores is very different than Zach Bryan.
Yes.
He is by no leap of the imagination a Zach Bryan ripoff. And apparently that's popular on TikTok. That's apparently popular with the kids these days.
The only thing they really have in common.
How popular he is.
Yeah.
I'd be curious, like how. Yeah.
The only thing they really have in common is good songwriting, and they both do videos acoustically out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know how popular Wyatt Flores is. Out, so like you said, we're a little bit deep into it. We've known about him for a little bit now. How popular is he?
One thing that I'm curious, I want both y'all's takes on this, because I got to thinking of after I watched that video. I don't think this moment where all this stuff is at the very tippy top of what's popular is going to last as long as it would have in a previous generation, because of social media. I think the trends move so quickly compared to because of the internet and our screens. To reference Hardy, I think that it's not going to last as long. It's going to be a 2 or 3 year span, and it still will have the people that were fans then will remain fans. So they're still going to sell a lot of tickets, but I just don't think it's going to be the top dog for as long as it would have been in a previous generation, because even like clothing trends and shit are moving quicker than they used to. Like, apparently I found out the other day that baggy jeans are back in. So that was just 15, 20 years ago. Those were the thing. But
Yeah.
it's like things are moving quicker now in terms of like it used to be every 30 years. It might be every 20 now.
Well, one-piece swimming suits for women are
Yeah, they're
also
back.
in.
They're back.
Yeah, they're also back. Yeah, I also, well, to put a little bit of a buffer on your point, I think our generation and to an extent the turnpike generation, which is our generation, but spans a little bit wider age group. Their kids are growing up on this.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, this is goes into my theory of what you grow up on is what you're innately fond of when you start to hit your teenage years and your formative years and your early adult years. So I think it might be a little bit more durable than that.
Yeah.
The Zach Bryan crowd, not so much. They're all Zoomers who are 22 and they don't have any kids. But the earlier 2010 era, those kids are like 13 or 14 now. If you had a kid then,
Yeah.
so I mean they're starting to reach that age of their real formative years. And if you're a parent and you had a kid then, which was when Turnpike started to blow up, they're starting to reach their formative years. They may not. They may love Turnpike. They may love Jason Isbell, blah, blah, blah. So I think it might be a little bit more durable.
Yeah.
Unless they just become purely rebellious and they're just like, fuck this, and I'm going to listen to Drake.
Yeah. I will say, though, being our age now, kind of a cool thing because we were young and we're old enough to have been able to go see and be a part of the Turnpike movement the first time around, but we're young enough to still be able to be a part of the Zach Bryan stuff as well. Because there is a generational divide between the two fans. The older Turnpike fans don't really love Zach Bryan. The really young Zach Bryan fans don't really get Turnpike. We're right in the sweet spot on that. So
yeah, true shit.
All right. Well, be sure to check out. Go ahead, Andy.
I got one more point.
Go ahead.
On
another thing.
Durability of it. I'm curious on this because I could see this from two. Is it the writing that's popular or is it the sound? Because if you go back to like 2013 and stuff, like you take like Morgan Wallen and Hardy, their writing is better than Florida Georgia Line.
Yeah.
Is it the sound that's popular or is it songwriting making a comeback? I think
it's the songwriting.
It's far more durable than the sound.
I think it's the songwriting personally because the amount of time I've seen TikToks of young people like getting real into the lyrics of Zach Bryan and just is you didn't see that in past generations because people don't listen to the words, people just want a cool beat and that's why hip hop was so big in the early 2000s when they had some really good lyricists in hip hop, but the really popular stuff wasn't what it once was. And you fast forward to rap now, is like mumble rap being a thing tells you all you need to know about like nobody really knows what is being said in half the stuff. It's about the beats. But to Andy's point, I do think the songwriting is making a comeback, and I love that.
Oh, even our generation, another great example. We were right at the dividing line of early 2000s hip hop, which had great lyricism, great beats, and then our freshman or sophomore year, you started getting the 2 Chainz and the Kodak Blacks, which were more along the lines of the start of mumble rap.
Yeah.
And then now it's just all shit. But
yeah,
we all grew up on Eminem and all that. The later Eminem, which I think, to your point, Andy, I think songwriting and lyricism and starting to make a comeback.
Well said, both of you. And be sure to check out the link in the description of this podcast. It says click here to leave us a voicemail. Let us know what you think about check out the Grady Smith video. I'll link the Grady Smith video in the description here. If you haven't checked it out, you should. But leave us a voicemail. Let us know what you think. Is this country music's Nirvana moment? What do you think of Zach Bryan? Why is he the one that's kind of reached into the stratosphere? Is it the lyrics? Is it the sound? What's your take on it? We'd love to hear from you. Give us 5 stars, great review, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and be sure to check out the website countryandcoldcans.com for blog content and merch. For this episode of Country and Cold Cans, I am Logan, sitting here with Trucker Andy and Kyle. See you next time.
Take care, guys.